Here we have verse 7 of the book of Jude. The author here, Jude, is giving us three examples, all of which are drawn from the Old Testament, all of which serve as a rather distinct warning against the temptation that the recipients of this letter may have to wander off into various kinds of teaching that actually abuse the grace of God, as he's already intimated in the earlier examples. The first one, of course, was the children of Israel being released from Egypt, and yet later some, though they came out, they were part of that great crowd of people that escaped Egypt, were later judged because of their disobedience. He then refers to angels who didn't hang on to their original positions of authority, but went outside the bounds of that which was appropriate for them. Maybe an allusion to Genesis chapter 6, the first few verses there that the author has in mind. The third example that he brings is, of course, the well-known example of Sodom and Gomorrah. The sentence, it's a good idea simply to identify the major skeleton of the sentence, so we're going to start hos. Likewise is the idea, or even as, or as. Sodoma, the word for Sodom. Kai, Gomorrah, the word for Gomorrah. So that's the principal subject. We're going to have a little bit of additional to it, and then we look through the sentence for the verb, the chief verb, and we find that it's way down here. So prokentai. This is from prokemai, means to set something forth, to set it up for visible examination. That's the idea. So Sodom and Gomorrah set forth, and then the direct object of that is degma, which is the word for an example. So Sodom and Gomorrah set forth an example, and that's the fundamental sentence that we have, and then we look at all of the collateral information that adds additional insight. So Sodom and Gomorrah, and the first of these is here, kai, the connective hai. This is the feminine plural article, so Sodom and Gomorrah and the. And then we have this phrase, peri autos. The word for the word preposition peri means around or concerning. In this sense, it's more just the idea of around, as in surrounding, speaking geographically. So the surrounding them. Autos here is the feminine of the pronoun. It's the accusative because it's going with peri, so the surrounding them, and the them here goes back to Sodom and Gomorrah. Polis, which is, of course, once again in the nominative, so Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding them cities. Then this phrase in the accusative, it's accusative, kind of an additional description tone. The accusative article here, homoion, is a adjective. It means like, so the like or similar. Tropon, word for tropos, which means manner. So with reference to a similar manner, and then tutois. This is in the dative, plural. And it has been a question, what's the tutois referring to? It would mean with reference to these. So with like manner, or in like manner, with reference to these. I think the best view of it is that it's actually an allusion back to the preceding verse where we were referring to angels that hadn't left their proper position, and now in a way that's sort of similar to them, we have Sodom and Gomorrah also leaving what was the appropriate position, it seems the idea. And then we have actually three different participles. These are all in the feminine nominative plural. So they go back to Sodom and Gomorrah and these surrounding cities. The first of them is ekpornusai. This is from ekpornuo. The root of it is pornuo, or porne, which we get the word pornography from that. It has to do with various forms of uncleanness, especially sexual uncleanness. The ek at the beginning of it actually adds additional force to it, so giving themselves over to sexual immorality would be the idea. So in a way that's similar to these angels in the preceding verse giving themselves over to sexual morality. That's why I mentioned Genesis chapter 6, the first few verses, because there we hear what at least arguably may be angelic beings who did the very same thing, and that may be the allusion that the author has in mind. Kai, the connective, apelthusai. This is from aperkamai, means to go away. This again, you'll notice, is the same thing. It's a participle. It's in the feminine nominative plural. So these cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, gave themselves over to immorality and went away, departing again from their appropriate station. And then where did they go? Well, episso is a preposition. It takes the genitive. It means after, going after something. The genitive sarkos, after flesh, and heteros, strange or other flesh. A casual allusion here, you might say, to presumably homosexual behavior, going after flesh that is inconsistent with what would be natural. And then we come to these words that we looked at earlier, prokaintai, setting forth, as in setting forth something for examination. The word degma means an example. And what is this an example of? He says it's an example of, and this is in the genitive now, puros, an example of fire, and ioniu, eternal fire. So these cities and the judgment that befell them becomes an example of eternal fire, and we see that example here with hupekusai, which is from hupeko, to have under, literally. Usually it is translated something like suffering, to have something and be under its weight. And in this case, they're under the weight of dike, which is rooted in words like dikaios and others, righteous, but in this case it means righteous vengeance. So suffering, righteous vengeance. So they are an example of eternal fire. They don't represent eternal fire, obviously. The fire eventually went out there, but they're sort of illustrative of it by the fact that they suffer this vengeance. So this is the third of his examples. It's an indication that these cities are also pointing out the very same kind of peril that might be sustained by people who leave orthodox understanding, we might say, and go off following those who are teaching them things that represent a perversion, really, as he told us earlier, of the proper understanding of the grace of God.